All right, this is the after-action report from the cost side of Reindeer Games 2014, the latest AMS event, which took place in Jacksboro, Texas, this past weekend, which was December 7th, 6th and 7th. And we're going to run through kind of what we planned, kind of what happened, and of course add in the funny stories along the way. Just as a little heads up, the cost leadership for this particular event, the CR was Greg Anderson, the XO is Adam Perry, or Zippo, First Sergeant, which is myself, is Kyle Noe, the S3 was Vin Trong, the first platoon leader was D-Train, second platoon leader was Slab, and the third platoon leader was Penley, and then of course we also had the infamous Bud JP, and Big Bo Silva as our two CC combat controllers for the event. This is a quick field overview of what was going on as far as how it went out. It's actually about 120-ish acres overall, but it's definitely hourglass shaped, which makes for some fun there, soft playing. I put some of the major terrain points on there: the North Plateau, the North Village, the East Creek Bed, the West Creek Bed. Annotated in the green lines there, the North Peak and the South Peak. A couple things, the elevation difference on this field is really quite substantial. The North and South Peak, the South Peak probably has about a 60-65 foot elevation of the surrounding area, and the North Peak is probably close to about 75-ish feet of elevation raised above the rest of the surrounding area. And then to make matters even worse, the creek beds, as a general rule, were about an 8 to 10 foot drop, almost at 90 degrees straight down into about a 10 foot wide to 12 foot wide creek bed all the way along there, which made for some interesting play, specifically along the west side of the field, because that was really the only cover you ever had. On this next slide, there's a couple points of interest. I labeled where the UFS fob was. There was a weapons cache, which was another interesting point. A fuel depot, which is a small cluster of buildings, and then, of course, the cost fob, which was our starting point. We were sunk pretty far back there, and it was not terrible, but it was some rough huffing there at first. The next thing is I'll go through the plan phases on what we had expected to happen when myself and Anderson had kind of gone through, we had been to the field probably combined 13, 14 times in the last decade or so, and so we kind of knew what to expect as far as we didn't have all the fragos, obviously, or anything else. We just kind of knew what areas we would want to control and how hard we'd have to hit them to get there. Plan phase 1, if you see the timeline, is H, which is the start, H hour, and then H plus 30 minutes. Within the first 30 minutes, our initial plan was to take the first platoon and shove them straight up the creek bed towards the fuel depot and hopefully get to the fuel depot prior to best players, and then send second and third kind of up a road through a creek bed and then up over the south side through the South Peak, and then up to the North Peak. And that was kind of the plan. Once we got there, the idea was to hold it. Not necessarily keep advancing, but basically just hold in place and kind of just set up a nice defensive line to just kind of figure out where Top was going to move his guys to and wherever else, and kind of get our reinforcements back in, give our guys time to get medicked, and then also give us time to set up our respawn point, which we put up in between the North and South Peaks. And then we gave ourselves until about an hour to do that. Starting an hour in, which would have been about 11 o'clock, the plan was to push, basically to, a completely wipe of the next couple hundred yards in front of our lines. Knowing that creek bed was miserable to fight in, we made the determination platoon 3, led by Penley, which was actually a light platoon. They only had about 2 squads, and the game plan was to flank any of the UFS lines from the east while pushing D-Train and his guys up from the south past the fuel depot and really raise that line up another 200 meters, simultaneously pushing second platoon, which the XO was going to go with Slab on that one, and shove into the North Village. and we expecting a lot of heavy resistance either on one or both of those fronts. We expect that to take about an hour and a half. Once we got there, at the end of phase 2, you see basically once again settle down, get everybody respawn back in, and get our defensive perimeter back up and going. Basically secure all of North Village, the creek bed in the middle of the field with 3rd Platoon, and then also D-Train's guys dig back in on a choke point on that side of the little field there, which is heavily defensible and almost impenetrable if you're not coming from a side, almost impossible to get through. Starting 3 hours in, we wanted to do our final push, and that was basically to push. We kind of knew the general area where his fob was going to be, and so we decided we were going to push him all the way back. Not for sure exactly where it'd be. We just kind of have to surround the entire airfield, which is just the west of the plateau, and then also the entire, that entire side of the field. So the idea was 1st Platoon would push up as far as we could. 3rd with Penley once again would shove the creek bed back to there's a road crossing there that if you can get to that, you can defend it pretty well. And then once again take Slav with 2nd Platoon up into the plateau and really just cut off any ability to get us outflanked since we were past the choke point in the middle of the field. Once we had it, we expected 4 hours for that to take if everything kind of went as planned, just because it was either going to work or it wasn't. But we figured if stuff was working and we kept pushing in all the different directions, which kind of would have looked weird, taking guys from the left side of the field to the right side of the field and vice versa, back and forth. If we confused them enough, we figured we could push it pretty hard. And basically, after 4 hours in, spread 2nd Platoon out across the plateau to keep anybody from flanking, and then 1st and 3rd hold down, basically those creek beds, and just keep dumping people into it. And then if we needed to, move the respawn barrel up about another, 200-ish meters, basically right behind 3rd Platoon, so that everybody would have a nice, easygoing endpoint. So that was basically what we had planned for how this was going to go. Now we'll get into and everybody else is going to jump in here a little bit. Also on the line, by the way, we've got Anderson, Zippo, JP is on here, and we'll kind of go through exactly what did happen, and then some of the finer points along the way. So get us started. Actual phase 1, we didn't get as far as we had hoped, especially on the side with 1st Platoon and D-Train. Myself and Silva were deployed with D-Train and 1st Platoon, but the UFS FOB was significantly closer because they had an empty field for most of the way. So they actually got to Fuel Depot first, and there was no. They were just dug in pretty hard. There's a couple of hard points to include a big truck and a road that was protected by the edge of the field. It was almost impossible to get around. So we pretty much got held down unexpectedly right off the get-go, and that was about it for the first 30 minutes, was just playing a little touch and go here and there, trying to find some weak points. We never did in that first 30 minutes. To Anderson, Zippo, and JP to discuss what happened with 3rd and 2nd Platoons.
Well, I'll jump in first. We had a few slight changes the day of what we decided to do. We realized that we were a lot further back from the north and south peak than we realized we would be. So we organized Zippo, basically cannibalized whoever wanted to sprint from 2nd and 3rd Platoon. And we had them sprint forward because, let's be honest, I'm kind of fat and JP's older, so we weren't doing it. So Zippo sprinted up with what was equivalent to basically a squad and a half of guys to make sure we secured the peaks. Zippo, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Our guys got about halfway to the north peak before they started tuckering out a little bit, and we got to the south peak, held it pretty good. About that time when we put LMGs and DMRs on the south peak, we saw UFS forces creep up to the north side of the north peak. About that time, Anderson showed up with the rest of the 2nd and 3rd Platoon, and we got the rocket in place. Preparing for this op, Greg stressed the importance of rockets and heavy weapons, just based on his past experiences at the field. and it proved invaluable on our initial assault.
I love how modest you are. So basically, the UFS guys were able to get there a lot quicker than us, and if Adam and those guys hadn't sprinted, we wouldn't have gotten to either peak before basically an entire UFS platoon had gotten into position. So all of you who sprinted, you did a great job, and we appreciate it. John, do you have anything to say on that?
The second.
Nope. All right.
Sorry, real quick. Let me hop in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much arrived after Anderson did, and I was pretty surprised by there was actually UFS forces on the northern peak, and they're also flanking around to the east. And then once the rocket and LMGs got in place, there was actually a pretty good coordinated effort to siege the North Peak. In that case, we threw a bunch of smoke in coordination with rocket strikes, and were able to overrun all the UFS positions on the North Peak, which actually is a pretty amazing choreographed move, which was basically worked to perfection.
It went off really, really smooth.
Yeah, it surprisingly did. I was actually surprised by how well they had that peak in force as quickly as they did.
The guys that are on the North Plateau or the North Peak really did good at following orders to send a couple squads down right to the base of the hill to watch the creek, and them flanking around and providing fire. We were just able to provide a lot of angles on the North Peak, and just overwhelmed the UFS forces. They were kind of cowering behind whatever cover they could get. So it was more or less a slow walk and just picking them apart.
Yeah, we threw so much suppressive fire on that peak, and they didn't really have anything else to do besides either retreat or just stay suppressed till they got shot. So hard situation for them.
Yep. All right.
All right, we'll move on. So this is the end of Phase 1. By the end of Phase 1, 2nd and 3rd had secured Victor, which is the North Peak, and had got some pretty good defensive line. And myself, D-Train, and Bo Silva over with 1st Platoon, we were playing a little bit of game of cat and mouse, trying to set people up for Phase 2, which we'll get to in a second. We kept pushing and falling back, specifically to stretch their line, their defensive line on that fuel depot, and try to get their guys stretched as much as possible. Right at that fuel depot, there's a choke point. And so we were just playing a little bit of game, but throw some guys at them, have them draw back, and try to draw as many people out as possible in preparation for Phase 2. Phase 2, here's the start of Phase 2. As opposed to what we had planned Phase 2 to actually be a flanking maneuver closer to the weapons cache, but because it got bogged down on the left at the fuel depot, 3rd Platoon with Penley actually came over and actually helped us secure the fuel depot. Prior to that advance on the west side of the field, we had took about 10 minutes to get that lined up, but we did initial volley of about 6 rockets, and then Penley and his guys shoved in from the east, and then D-Train did an awesome job coming up from the south. And we took the fuel depot and the remnants of one whole platoon, probably about 3 squads worth of UFS guys, and we only lost maybe 5 or 6 guys in that entire engagement while wiping out 3 squads of theirs. They just, like I said, D-Train and Penley just did a really good job. We said go. They all pushed all at the same time. Didn't have a lot of guys back at respawn at the time, and just kind of overran it pretty quick. And then, of course, Phase 2 also had 2nd Platoon just kind of inching that line up closer to the North Village. There was a lot of resistance there, and it was a lot of touch and go. And there's also that creek bed that runs right in the middle that caused some terrain problems just for getting guys back and forth. But once again, I'll let the guys talk more about what happened over on the east side with 2nd Platoon.
Well, over on the east side, was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. They had they just couldn't, because we had the high ground on that creek bed, they just couldn't cross that creek bed, and we were pretty much during most of Phase 2 we had already taken what we needed, and we were just sitting there holding it?
I bounced back and forth on phase 2. I was with platoon 3 as they pushed across that open field, and I was one of the 6 guys that ended up getting shot out of all that mass of people someone put around on me. But it went off really smooth, and we were able to push up that western road pretty far. And then I rendezvoused back up at North Peak, and we took a pretty large group, I forget which squad they were, and got pretty far north, almost east, completely east of the North Village.
That's right.
We held there for a while.
That's right, because that Frago came down for that the woods just on the east side, right?
Yep, and we initially thought that their mobile respawn was in the North Village, but it proved to be false. And it looked like a whole bunch of people were going in and respawning there, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah, simultaneous, right before this attack, we had gotten several fragos, one of which was to recover an item and then actually get it into the fuel depot. And we had pre-staged it about 150-ish, 200 meters south of the fuel depot, probably close to about 150. And then as soon as we took it, we got in there and got the points for the frago there. There was a couple other fragos going on simultaneously, specifically involving the North Village. But it was just, you know, a little slower going over just because of the amount of people that UFS had in the village.
Yeah.
So that was go ahead.
Yeah. Well, during this phase, I was a little worried because while the initial push from Victor to the North Peak went really well with light casualties, I was worried about the UFS forces pushing along the Western Creek bed, and I know it was real touch and go. I wasn't too concerned because we had stabilized our lines pretty well. We held the high ground, and worst came to worst, we could shift squads over from the east to the west. But I was a little concerned that they might break through our lines and then start doing harassing on Victor and on the North Peak. But our guys, Platoon 1, D-Train, and those guys evidently did a stellar job of stretching them out and holding the line, which was perfect because that gave us time to stabilize our position and start doing offensive operations on the eastern side.
I remember at one point, Kyle, I called for a sit rep, and I said, how are you guys doing? Do you have the fuel depot secure? And you responded, no. And then I asked for a head count, and you replied with 4.
Yeah, when I heard that, I was getting all my shit ready to haul ass over to their side.
Yeah, there was when we tried to go for the fuel depot, I said they got there first, and while we were playing the little back and forth game, basically we like I said, we kept throwing them at them, and then it was at some point there was like remnants of like a squad floating around there, and then myself and Big Bo Silva over there, and me and Bo literally were bounding, retreating at some points until another squad would come up, and then we'd bound, retreat again, and some other guys would come up, and it was pretty good times. Bo was sitting there behind a tree, just tagging guys. There's an old railroad track road that follows that line right there on the left hand side of the field, and he would just get right off that road and just throw rounds, 85, 90 yards down that road, and then I would be more in the woods just kind of moving, and as soon as they would get close as far as giving us fire, because we didn't want to go down, I'd move back 10 meters, and then he would cover me, and then I'd shoot a little and kind of try to keep their head down, and he'd bound back, and we just kept doing that. That was it was pretty touch and go there for a little while. He said that they got that fuel depot first, and it's just hard to take, and we just kept, going after it, and, pushing a squad, push a squad, and we just weren't going to get it. So
yeah, that was definitely the closest we came to defeat. Was we almost lost that position, and I to be honest, I did not expect them to beat us to the fuel depot at all. They got there really, really quickly. They must have had some really hardcore guys just full on sprinting to get there.
Yeah, and it wasn't that they got a couple people there, but by the time I had gotten there, and I wasn't in the back of the first platoon, I was more in the middle. they probably had, I don't know, let's say 6 to 8 guys in the depot alone, a couple more up on top of the road behind a truck, which was basically just a hard point that you're not going to get people out of, and then at least another squad in the creek bed. I mean, they had a pretty good force sitting there waiting for us.
And I think the key about this point when Josh's guys cut across the field is not only did we break the platoon-sized force that was in the fuel depot as they began to advance on the weapons cache or on W. Top shifted. I think he pushed all of his forces from the FOB when he realized what we were doing down there, and so we hit those forces, overwhelmed and broke them, and then I started to see him shift forces from the village side over there, and then we hit them. So he didn't realize how quickly we were overrunning his defenses, so we were able to smash basically three good-sized elements, one right after another, which really set UFS back on their heels for the rest of the day, because by that point, pretty much every UFS player had been decisively defeated in an engagement, and that affects the morale a lot. So.
Yeah, I mean, our initial planning phase before the op. I was concerned that the UFS would just kind of do a large maneuver just down the west side to try to break through on that, which I guess to a degree ended up being correct. But I mean, just the ability of first platoon to hold that position just long enough for second and third to start setting up their defenses, getting the North Peak, and then kind of starting to swing a gate and kind of put the rest of them in a pincer with terrain superiority ended up being key.
All right, well, let's move to the next phase because we're taking a little bit.
All right, I'll go through this. This is basically what the phase 2-ish, which was the end part of phase 2, which is first platoon with D-Train. After making that push, basically just hold off the line. And make that nice, solid defensive line right there, kind of right on the creek bed, just south of the UFS FOB. At the same time, who really didn't take a lot of casualties other than the XO, who was unlucky enough to block for a couple guys with that BB barrage. Thanks there, Adam. Come back over and push on the south side of the North Village with second platoon. And that went pretty well. I'm not going to lie. You know, the radio reports coming back over there. I was over there with D-Train, and we were just kind of regrouping, trying to get the squads all lined back up there on the line, so we could kind of know who was where, what, when, and how. And I heard the radio traffic. It went pretty well.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was just going to say that went pretty much like clockwork. It was pretty easy.
Now, sorry. The actual phase 3, we just leave remnants of second in the North Village with third platoon to hold down the line, and then send a couple of squads of second up and through that North Plateau. Specifically because we didn't want them getting the high ground on the village, to give them kind of like a spawn point up there to kind of get a footprint and then kind of push back. I wasn't there, but I think that went pretty well. Either Greg or Adam or JP, if you guys want to cover that.
That would have been Adam.
I was coming back from platoon 1 side, and I think it was Dudley's squad was walking up, and I asked you what you wanted them to do, and you wanted them to take a rest, but they were pretty gung-ho. So you told them to go ahead and go take North Peak, and it wasn't any matter of time at all before they reported in that they controlled North Peak. Like, they went in there and did it.
North Peak or North Plateau?
North Plateau, rather.
Yeah, I mean, after going from Victor to North Peak, I didn't see a whole lot of action. I was more on the top of North Peak doing command and control, relaying info as the first Sergeant XO and the CO was shift between the flanks. When I say flanks, I mean east and west. I know that just from listening to the comm traffic that it was that our guys had a little bit of resistance in North Village and going into the North Plateau, but they were able to, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, they kind of went straight up the gut plus around to the east, and it seemed like they, like Greg said, it seemed to go pretty much like clockwork.
Yeah, I don't even think it was 30 minutes before they called in that they controlled it. By this time, UFS seemed pretty demoralized. There was a small contingent of them that fought really hard, but at this point, it was pretty. We could move really freely throughout the AO.
I mean, we pretty much, they'd lost any type of initiative that they had, and I think any type of second wind they might have had got taken out of their sails as soon as you guys went and took the North Plateau.
All right, moving on to basically the end of phase 3, which was we basically just hardened up the lines, started getting guys rested, get a snack in them, get some more water in them, whatever else, and spread out. And basically, I was up but by about this time, I had climbed up the North Peak, and I was up there with Anderson, and I think JP was up there still as well. And we looked out the field, and basically we asked for a sit rep. And by the time we had that sit rep, we could look over. I mean, like I said, North Peak having the elevation advantage, you could really see what was going on. And basically, once we got the word out of D-Train and in 1st Platoon, basically how those trenches were going, same with Penley down there in the middle, and we could see the North Plateau. I looked at my watch, and it was 2:10. And I said, hey, we're minutes off. And that was just a good moment, not going to lie. It was like, hey, we planned this for best case scenario, and we missed it by 10 minutes. And almost going, I mean, literally, it's like, when does that happen? Normally, and even before the ops started, when I was going through the general idea with D-Train back at the FOB, just kind of saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, whatever else. I said, now, of course, that being said, everything I just said, goes out the window as soon as the first BB gets shot in our direction, because that's how it goes. But this day and this field and this time and that team, man, it went so perfect. So like I said, we were off by 10 minutes, and then we held it. Basically, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They put some fragos on us. We had to go chase whatever else. But for the most part, the lines were stable. Our guys were getting rested, and we're just kind of hanging out. And any time that they threw whatever at us, we had guys geared up, ready to go. They've been, in position for quite a while that were rested and ready to go. So from then on, it was pretty much just hold the line kind of thing. And really the only reason was we couldn't push any further because there was either nowhere to hold or we'd hit their FOB. So nobody really walked through the airfield, which is labeled by K on the map, and it's for that entire flat area. And if we tried to push into the trees through that flat area, we were too close to their FOB, so that was a no-go. So we pretty much pushed them all the way back and just kind of sat on them. That was good times. And then that sets us up for Sunday. I'll move as quickly into Sunday. We don't have a lot of time left.
Hang on, I got something to say about Saturday. So I was amazed by how well we predicted the enemy forces would move, which they did almost to a T to what we expected. And then B, I was happily surprised how well all our forces performed. I mean, they performed almost 100% exactly as planned. The only complaint I would have about what we did Saturday was probably around phase 3 was we got pretty complacent on the North Peak, and I got to give those guys props. There's probably 2 squads of UFS flanked around the east and a flanked around the west, and while we were all kind of sitting there admiring our handiwork, we had a squad roll up on the east and the west and came somewhat close to raiding on our parade. And that's about all I can really complain about.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but yeah, JP's right. Basically, true story. I had no gear on. My gun was sitting against a rock. My AVS was on top of the rock, and I had my jet boil out, and I was enjoying thoroughly a nice little meal of chili mac up there on top of the North Peak about 3:30 or 3:45, and all of a sudden some just jerk interrupting I said it, facetiously, but some jerk comes up in multicam, and the first BB out of that entire barrage that took out probably 5 or 6 guys up there with us hit me square in the neck, Great shot. I mean, it wasn't very far away, and it was, had to give those dudes props. They sneak and peeked all the way up through the east side, down the plateau, past the ravine, everything else. And if it had been a larger force, we probably would have seen them a lot earlier. But multicam was basically custom fit for that field, and they just did a fantastic job. But yeah, I was going to let that one go. But thanks, JP.
Yeah, I mean, the good lesson there is not to take anything away from those guys. They did a great job, and woulda, coulda, shoulda. But always set security and make sure someone's responsible for security, because that should never happen in the first place. But lesson learned.
Right. So that brings us on to Sunday. Oh, there we go.
I just like to point out that the CO didn't get shot. Everybody else.
Everybody else but the CO.
The CO didn't.
And the worst is I had to go. I went to the respawn barrel, and they had another squad attacking it. And luckily they stopped my respawn at the barrel, but we stopped them from taking it. But I had to go all the way back to the fob.
I was out in the middle of the field by point 5, and I heard the screaming over the radio. So I started and I had left my rifle up on top of the mountain, so I went running up the mountain, and about halfway through I got tired. And so saving y'all wasn't that important anymore. I had to catch my breath before getting up there. But I ended up grabbing my rifle and popping one guy. By the time we got reinforcements, they cleared out the rest.
Yep. Listen to security. It ain't a joke.
Security,
Yeah.
Don't get caught.
Even if you secure area, make sure the enemy knows you secure the area.
All right.
On a Sunday, Greg and I discussed, like, hey, what's Top going to do? So we really didn't want to mess with the plan very much because it worked so well, and we didn't really know what was going to happen. So we basically the exact same plan. The difference is on Sunday, Top had thrown literally almost every single person he had, maybe a light platoon or a squad and a bit down the west side of the field. But within the first 30 minutes, I was again with D-Train with 1st Platoon. We had pushed all the way up to the weapons cache without any resistance until we got almost 100 yards to their fob line where we couldn't go any further. And then 2nd and 3rd Platoon, it was kind of lucky. The UFS guys had decided to try to take the hill. The first day, Saturday, they had tried to take it from basically right through the middle of the field and just go up the west side of to the top. But on Sunday, they decided to push everybody basically through North Village to hold that down pretty steadily.
Wait, let me jump in here. So basically what they tried to do on Sunday is they wanted to get a little bit sneaky, and so instead of pushing straight to the field and letting us see their movements, they threw a couple handfuls of guys, I don't know how much resistance they hit, at D-Train and his guys, and he took the rest of his force and tried to go through North Village, around through the back creek, and sneak up on the North Peak from the east, well, the northeast. And it almost worked, but when we got up to the top of the North Peak with so little resistance, Adam Adam realized something was up, and when we calmed and D-Train had next to no resistance, Adam realized they were sneaking through the creek and threw a squad down in there, which pinned them up just long enough for reinforcements, and they almost broke through that creek bed. It almost worked.
Yeah, let me hop in there real quick. Sunday, Alex had to go say for finals, so I was a game control for Sunday. So I was actually stationed right next to North Village, and I could hear both command comms, and so I knew that there was a fight going on the east side, or excuse me, the west side in the creek bed. And I had figured that, prior to seeing how valuable the high ground was, that the UFS would send the majority of their forces to the high ground and contest the North Peak. And I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, but how it looked to me was they sent, forces down the west side as a feint, and the rest towards North Village, which they actually did a great job. The one thing, the main flaw of the federal forces was they would go into North Village and they would pile up on hard cover, and they had some guys would flank around east on the creek, but no one would ever secure the road just to the west of North Village, which also went through a creek. And when Adam was able to figure that out, what was going on, and counteract that, I saw cost forces come along from around the west, or flanking around the west through the creek, and in the west woods, and you'd have, one or two coalition soldiers suppress 5 or 6 federal soldiers that were hunkered down behind hard cover. And so instead of like pressing their sphere of security out from that hard cover, they kind of got condensed in one area, which you ended up having just very few people suppress them, and the rest just kind of get moved to the east and west and shoot them from the sides. So that's what I saw as control.
The value of North Peak is that when you're up there, you can't conceal movements if you're to the north anymore. So when I was able to get there, I looked west rather, didn't see anybody. And then I saw the tail end of Tan getting into the North Plateau, and I knew something was up. So it was pretty easy to adjust the forces and get them down there.
I think we can move to the next phase. Kyle? Hello?
This is Kyle.
Okay, bye. Looks like Kyle lost audio, so we'll just keep moving along. So once again, we established the line similar to where we did the day before. Then
there was, I think, one point on Sunday that we were actually taking fire on the North Peak from down on the creek, just at the base of the hill.
Yeah, sorry, Adam, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think they kind of did the same thing that they did Saturday, where they kind of did an end around to the east and kind of surprised us. At least that's what I heard over the comm chatter.
So anyway, then next what we worked on doing was D-Train set up his front, stretching from, there's basically a corner where the gate is on what would be his far left, up to the flag point on his far right. And then we took the other 2 platoons and we pushed on North Village, just attempting to control it again. We established that line there. We didn't push on the North Peak because their mobile respawn was on top of the hill, and we thought it would be, Adam actually came up with the idea to allow them to walk up and down the hill and wear themselves out for a couple hours before we decided to take the respawn barrel. So that was the, sorry, go.
It was the goal to just keep them on a constant treadmill.
Right.
Keep our guys in the creek and a little bit of hard cover in the North Village, but the more and more because I was getting tired going up the North Peak, so I knew it had to be even worse for them since they were getting shot as they're going up and down the hill.
Right.
I'm not going to lie.
We had moved our respawn barrel all the way up to where the creek bed and the road met. So our guys didn't have far at all to walk, but they were going up and down that hill. So that's pretty.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did not know that, but that's actually an extremely intelligent move. So good job, Adam.
So that's basically why we decided to stop here. Oh, well, apparently that's the end of that. And we did end up, open this guy back up, but we did end up that day going up in the last, I don't even know, what was it, 30 minutes?
45 minutes.
Yeah, it was like the last hour.
Yeah, we ended up going up seizing that barrel, but
that's when D-Train was able to grab those radar jammers, and you told me to go put them in the North Village.
Right.
So when I got down there, me and Travis Carver planted them in the buildings and got those points. And shortly after, he came over on the radio and said, take the North Peak. And that's when Penley was working around. North Plateau. And that's when Penley was working around. So we basically had all angles of fire on the North Plateau. and we were waiting for Penley to get into place, and he just wasn't on the radio. And so we were mounted up, and we ended up tossing smoke, and we yelled, "Penley, where you at?" And he was disassembling the respawn barrel. Like, he didn't tell us or anything. So we're
Nice.
getting ready to go up there, and he was already up there disassembling it.
Well,
So we all pushed, and there was a few stragglers.
it was pretty awesome to be, because I sat on most of this. I sat on the North Peak, and to hear, you know, most of everybody getting ready to go, and then Penley finally come over the radio and go, "We're disassembling it now." D-Train and Adam just hollered at the top of their voices. Everyone in those platoons hollered at the top of their voices, and they just ran up that hill and seized that barrel. And that was a lot of fun to be able to hear that from, all the way over at the
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're paying attention, our lines were a little bit messed up by that time. This is after the Bo kidnapping debacle, which I watched footage of because watching it live was probably the funniest thing I've seen in airsoft in a long time.
Looked like a train wreck.
Looked like a train wreck. Yeah. So, anyway, is there anything else you guys want to go over?
Well, no, go ahead, Adam.
Go ahead, JP.
Okay.
Adam, you go.
Okay, let me go. Okay, Adam, you go.
It has to be said that there was like the second day, I would say about 30% of UFS had gone home and just didn't come back. But there was a large group of UFS that ended up staying, and they played hard the entire game. I don't have the patience or maturity to sit there and take a defeat like that. They had a good group of guys that stayed behind and kept playing hard, and so hats off to them for not giving up and kept playing hard the entire route.
Yeah, I mean, coming into this event, it's been a rough year for the coalition. As much as I wish we could like sway the points to make it all happy, fuzzy animals and hearts and shit. We don't. The coalition was overdue. This ended up being the perfect AO for it between Greg and Kyle's expertise and experience on this field, and then everything fell into place. I mean, from the initial planning and the estimation of how the Federals would move their forces to the communication, the execution of maneuvers. I mean, it was almost 100% perfect. Besides the war we had with Platoon 1 on the west side, I mean, besides I think the first broken home, I don't know if I've seen anything go so clockwork. And
The first, or are you talking about the second?
the second, sorry, the second. The communication on the command net was awesome because, I mean, if Platoon 1 or 2 or 3 was not able to talk to the first sergeant command or S3, one of us had the state of mind to know on the second or third transmission to relay the traffic. And the lanes of communication stayed pretty clear and open the entire Saturday. When I ran control Sunday, it was the same thing. For the most, as far as I saw, everybody did what they were told. I was amazed by how disciplined, say First Platoon was, how well Penley did. I mean, I was incredibly impressed with. I mean, I was impressed with everybody. I mean, it was like the stars aligned kind of shit. So,
Yeah, I mean, Slab, we haven't talked about Slab a whole lot, and the reason we did that is he was just a rock. I mean, it was nothing flashy, but it was his first time to be a platoon leader, and he just was phenomenal at the nuts and bolt and of keeping his platoon where they were supposed to be, and so disciplined that at no point was it even a question that his point in the line was going to fail.
yeah, and
He was proactive all weekend.
yeah.
You didn't have to tell him to do anything. He was already doing it. He would tell us there was a problem. They would say, "Okay, what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm already doing it. Something to fix it."
Yeah.
And if he didn't tell you he was already doing something to fix it, he had options for you. He said,
Yeah.
"These are the options I think would fix it. Which one do you want?" Which is phenomenal because most platoon leaders, especially new platoon leaders, don't do that. They go, "I need troops over here on the west flank," and you're like, "Well, I don't have any for you." and then they just say, well, that's the only thing that's going to stop this. It's, well, sometimes you just need to get it done. And
Yeah.
he did. He did.
Yeah. In our in our command, I mean, being Greg or Kyle or Adam, everybody did a good job of making sure forces were fresh, making sure no one got completely spent. You know, the understanding of the topography of the land, and if we had to send, you know, this squad or this platoon to point X, that they're going to be spent at this time, and making sure we rotate guys out. You know, a lot of the players don't understand, like, the actual, on these, and this is not even one of our large events, but how much planning comes in to make sure, you know, things happen for a reason. And it was awesome to, you know, A, be from command, and B, be a combat controller and see everything fall into place, you know, especially when it goes exactly as planned. It was awesome. And it was really good to see, you know, all the gears turning in the machine, all the platoon leaders being responsible, all the squads being disciplined. I mean, Deadly and Frontline, those guys actually performed incredible. I was a little worried about them, but they, I mean, pretty much nonstop, go, go, go. D-training those guys did an awesome job, and I was incredibly and happily surprised by how well Slab did controlling his guys. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say besides, I mean, goddamn, it was near perfect.
Yeah, I mean, we really lucked out. To pull these kind of maneuvers, you have to have players who, one, have the capability of staying on a line, and two, have the discipline to understand that, hey, you might not shoot for 30 minutes, but over the course of the entire weekend, you're going to get more trigger time in this way.
Yeah, and you know, and on the flip side of that, I think, you know, why it was so lopsided and why we did so well was we're going against a UFS force that had some good NCOs, but I think at the squad level and maybe the company level, they didn't have those disciplined guys. I think they had newer players that were more new to this type of play and stuff like that, and didn't have the discipline. You know, they want to go out and they want to get the kills, and they want to do that kind of stuff, which is great. But at the end of the day, that wears on you, that grinds you, and I think that, you know, we wore them out, both physically and mentally and morally. And I think that's, you know, turnaround Sunday, I think that's why they had more attrition than, I mean, obviously more than we did. And I think, you know, those are always factors in the planning of one of these type of operations. And I think, I mean, you know, cost was overdue, and I think every way you score this, it was just a victory. I don't know how else better say it. I mean, it was a good spanking.
The goal was to come back after those last couple of losses and hit them with a haymaker. And I think just based on point differential, I feel as if almost evened out the past couple of ops just off point differential.
Yeah, I mean, if you could put apples to apples, I think I would agree with that statement.
All right. Well, I think we probably need to wrap this up. We're already going to have to break it up. Do you guys have any last things you want to say?
No, I mean, I would just, you know, I appreciate all the hard work that the COS command put in. You know, I appreciate all the platoon leaders and all the effort that people put into this. This is, you know, for 48 hours, it really makes a difference, and I think that was a big part of our success was the planning and prep.
I agree. I mean, it was a truly unique experience to be involved in. Adam, do you have any final words?
The op is just a good jump start for the 2015 season, and I'm really looking forward to making 2015 a green year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I'm confident about that.
Thank you guys so much, and we will talk to you later.
All right, guys. Take care.